I can tell you, like, I'm a little bit nervous for this particular sermon today. Because if you are a married person, or if you are a human who has ever struggled in relationship, you don't have to get much further than Song of Solomon chapter 1 to find the crux of most of the problems you probably face in your human relationships, which also probably says something about our relationship with God as well. And so as we dig into it today, it's very revealing of who we are as people in our relationships together, from the most shallow to the most intimate in our relationship with God. And we come into this space here. So hear the word of the Lord this morning. Oh, that he would kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your caresses are more delightful than wine. The fragrance of your perfume is intoxicating. Your name is perfume poured out. No wonder young women adore you. Take me with you. Let's hurry. Oh, that the king would bring me to his chamber. And the chorus responds, we will rejoice and be glad in you. We will celebrate your caresses more than wine. And the voice of the woman continues, it is the only right that they adore you. Daughters of Jerusalem, I am dark like the tents of Kedar, yet lovely like the curtains of Solomon. Do not stare at me because I am dark, for the sun has gazed on me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me take care of the vineyards. I have not taken care of my own vineyard. So tell me, you whom I love, where do you pasture your sheep? Where do you let them rest at noon? Why should I be like one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions? And the male voice speaks, if you do not know, most beautiful woman, follow the tracks of the flock and pasture your young goats near the shepherd's tents. When we see this dynamic begin to unfold, you start to hear those words and you go, okay, that's a great poetic love song. What are we doing with that in church this morning? How do we unpack this? What does that mean? I'm going to, as we go through, try to identify the words. I'm not going to, mirror the voices of the drama as we're reading through Song of Solomon. But as we look at it, there are things that we see, and the first thing that we start to discover is the art of intimacy unfolds in the very first chapter of Solomon's song. If we were to go back to Genesis chapter 1, before sin enters the world, when God made everything, on the day that he made male and female, something beautiful happened. In the complementary form, that means men and women are different, but they affirm each other in their physical form. In the co-equal standing as image bearers of God, that means that we have the same standing before God. Men aren't higher than women. Women aren't higher than men. We're co-equal, yet we complement each other. God took the relationship between man and woman that he will call marriage, and he says this is the ultimate witness to the world of his goodness and of his reign. Because as the man and the woman were to multiply and subdue the earth, it wasn't just about dominance. It was also about benevolence, care for the earth, and care for its creation. And when we start to see that beautiful form work out, the co-equal yet complementary form, we see that there's something quite intimate about it. The way we are made as men and women are intended to value each other, to accentuate each other. I mean, even in the broken identities of our world, when we talk about these conversations of transitioning between gender, we see the tensions in that. One is not the other. Men and women are different, and yet there's something about when the relationship comes together the way God intended, there are beautiful things that happen. Intimacy is often the thing that gets in the way, though. In Genesis chapter 2, where we see a very personal story of the two humans we call Adam and Eve. And as God begins to bring that relationship together, we are told, Adam's song, this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And then Moses speaks into it, responding to the whole nation of Israel. It's for this reason that we say, it's for this reason that we say, let a man leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife and be one flesh. That phrase of one flesh is where we get the word intimacy. And when intimacy happens, we are experiencing in human relationship the greatest witness of who God is. And that's what makes Song of Solomon so powerful. It is a book of deep intimacy accentuated at a marriage and in a marriage relationship, but it also tells us of the kind of relationship that God wants with each of us. When Jesus prayed in John 17, he says this amazing statement, Father, let them be one together as we are one. A deepness, a union, an intimacy of human relationship that's not just marriage touching, it's whole life touching. And there is an art to intimacy, and we see this, and it begins to unfold. And if you remember, the witness of marriage first talks about God. The thing that we see is that being passionate toward your lover is good. And if we were to unpack the conversation of the ultimate lover, there is no greater lover in all the universe than God himself. Like the one who made everything and sustains everything as an act of love, saw so fit to overcome everything humans had rejected. If we were to only live in Genesis chapter 2, there was no reason for Jesus to ever live and die. No reason. It was a relationship of intimacy. God with his creation, the creation with its creator, and the creation within itself. And then sin enters the world. Because somewhere along the lines, people saw so fit to tell God that we knew better than he did how the universe should work. And we still tell God that today. Whether it's in marriage, it's in relationship, it's in life. We love to tell God how much we know more than he does about what the universe should be like. And we're still looking at images from the Webb telescope and being profounded by them as it's now sending us things back. The edges of the universe, and God's like, yeah, I knew that already. I put it there. And we're trying to tell him how to be. And in that dynamic, we see like it unfolds like the desire that you would kiss me with the kisses of your mouth. Your caresses are more delightful than wine. It's a statement of passion toward the lover. You ever think back, we are watching Little House on the Prairie with our littles. We had read through the books, and now we're watching some of the TV show. And yesterday, we're slowly going through it. And so we're on an episode where little Laura falls and gets a, puppy love crush on Johnny Johnson, who just moved into town. And she oogles at him, and she tries to spin everything, but he's got the sweets for her sister. That always makes for conflict, just throwing that out there. Johnny Johnson. And she did everything she could. She wore her church bows to class. She got her mom's best oatmeal cookies, invited him to go fishing. She outfished the guy in the episode. All that she could do to just get him to pay attention to her, and it never happened. He didn't give her the light of day. Now, he was 15 and she's like 11. That's a whole different thing too, right? He was wise to not pay attention to her. But I remember when Corey and I first started dating. We met in Sunday school. I wasn't real interested in having a girlfriend at the moment. My body had just fallen apart from football. I was trying to figure out life after football. It's a great medication to be able to go smash people on a regular basis and not get in trouble for it. So I'm trying to figure out life within myself. I'm trying to figure out life with God. I was a fairly new believer. I'd said yes to Jesus about a year and a half prior. And now I'm digging into what does it mean to grow in my faith. I helped get this college group started at the church that we were mutually attending, and there's Corey. Man, she was in hot pursuit. If you were on, I wish the camera could pan around the other way right now. Oh, man, she was in hot pursuit. It took me a minute. I'm a slow learner, apparently. But, man, we would We would go on dates, and our dates would end, and then we would start talking. We would sit on the couch, and we would talk forever and just talk and talk and talk and get to know all these deep details about each other. It was so powerful. Do you remember when you first believed in Jesus? That spark that just felt like it was never going to go away, and then something in life happens down the road. That spark kind of wanes. That tension of holding passion for our life. Being passionate towards our lover is good, whether that lover is a spouse or that lover is the God of the universe who made everything. Our passion is good. Our desire for intimacy with our lover is good. To want to be with the person that we love most, or to want to be loved by that person most, that desire is good. And it's put in us for a reason. That desire, like where are we going to go with this? And that draw, that push to be loved and to want to be loved, not just to have passion for, but to actually desire it in return. I want to be loved back. God looks over us and he tells us that he loves us back, but there are times it doesn't feel that we're loved back. It's much easier to feel the love of an earthly lover than it is of our heavenly Father who loves us most. And then there comes those tensions. I mean, we're talking like if you're a man in the room right now, you're a man online, the tension of we're talking about this woman speaking. Is it okay for the man to have these kinds of feelings too? Absolutely it is. When we start talking about desire and intimacy, we're not talking about lust. We're not talking about an unhealthy pull of our soul that takes us away from everything good. We're not talking about late nights, quiet moments with a phone or a computer. We're not talking about another person who walks by you at a restaurant and you turn your head to get an extra gaze. We're talking about the person that God has put right in front of you to knit you with. And if you're single, the desire isn't wrong. It's part of who God made you to be. Like we've come into these conversations for so long saying that these expressions and these identities, they don't have a landing place if you're single. They do. But here's what's happened. We have elevated the human relationship to be higher than the divine relationship. I mean, even like when I was going through high school, like we had these rallies at our school, like growing up in Texas, it's right there, the buckle of the Bible Belt, And so they would have these True Love Waits rallies, and these Christian speakers would come into our public high schools and tell us how a bunch of teenage guys and girls, you're supposed to save yourself for marriage. And they call it purity culture now as they start to walk through it, and transactional sexuality and all these kinds of conversations. And they would tell you got to save yourself for marriage because when you get married, man, you're going to have the best sex ever. And then people got married after hearing that. And they struggled and they failed with intimacy and desire and passion. And then they wonder, where's God in the marriage? Where is the promise of the good sex? And what happened to everything we were told in that culture? It's because we painted the picture too low. The bar was set too low. The picture was not quite profound enough to pay attention to. We didn't tell people that God was worthy of our passion, and that God was worthy of our desire, and that he was greater than. We put a very low bar on it. And marriage is beautiful. And sex in marriage is beautiful. But it's too low of a bar to sustain the soul. And as we started to find out those things, we watched through that, and generations of people and generations of marriages began to break and fail. Like, that culture wasn't new to me in high school. That's kind of where we were for about 100 years in the United States. In particular. And what happened, instead of teaching people about the depth of intimacy with God, our Creator who loves us most, and raising the bar that our sexuality is worth Him, and our relationship was worth Him, we dropped the bar to say it was worth another person who could never sustain us. And intimacy got all kinds of wrapped up. Have you ever been to an art museum and listened to people talk about art? I happen to really enjoy going to art museums. We're probably going this week. There's a collection of 5 Van Gogh paintings around this olive grove that he painted while he was in a psychiatric ward. They're on display here at the MIA. That was not a commercial, by the way. I just love art. We're going to go. We're going to look at them. People are going to talk about them and talk about all the different things they know or don't know about Van Gogh. One of my favorite times at an art museum, we were at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, the MoMA. Andy Warhol's Campbell Soup is there, if you know the painting. Marilyn Monroe is there. There's great, great paintings that Warhol put out. Others are there. I'm walking through the museum, and there is a plaque that is describing this piece of art, and there are 2 women looking at a white wall. And they're like this. This is just so profound. And they're talking a full conversation about a white wall. Because it's got a plaque on it with an artist's name. And what they didn't realize is there was an arrow pointing up. And so I listened to them for a minute just talk about this wall. I'm tickled on the inside. And I'm thinking, I should let them know the art is above their head. And so I tapped, excuse me, what are you looking at? Oh, this magnificent piece of art. And I was like, can I tell you something? They're like, yeah. I'm like, look up. Oh, it was so funny. It was grand. But then they saw the art, and there was something real on the ceiling. But they had thought they were talking about the art that was no art at all. It was just a white wall. Sometimes we do that with intimacy. We do that with relationship. We think we know what we're talking about. There's a sign for an artist there, but we haven't really engaged intimacy. Sometimes the sign says something like Dr. Laura or Dr. Ruth or Dr. whomever, and we think that person has to know everything about intimacy because they've got the degree in it, right? And we start to measure ourselves against the failed aspects of intimacy because we always think there's someone who's a better lover, better looking, better technique, better whatever, and we lose sight of what intimacy is really about. It happens here in the text. We struggle with being lovable. Daughters of Jerusalem, I am dark like the tents of Kedar, is not a statement of affirmation for this woman. The Shulamite woman comes from a different region. In Jerusalem, a little bit lighter skin, she would have been struggling with the comparison woman to woman. Who does she match up to? How does she fit in? We're going to find out later in the text about Solomon. There's some allusions to his life. Someone told me last week, I wasn't a big fan of the Song of Songs because of Solomon's relational history. What does he know about intimacy? Now, Solomon had something like 300 wives and 700 concubines. I don't know if he's making numbers up. I don't know. That's what the text reports. So how can that person speak something about a faithful, committed relationship that mirrors the faithfulness of God over us when that person hasn't lived faithful? And that argument hit the text for generations, not just from this one person's voice, but yet somehow, some way, God preserved these words for our lives today. So this woman, when she looks at herself compared to all the 700 other women, whatever, says, where do I fit? Can I possibly be loved? My skin is dark. My mother's sons, they were angry with me. They sent me away. Now, the man is going to come back and affirm her as beautiful, but in this moment, she's struggling with being lovable. And in that statement of being out in the sun and working hard, if you've ever done any type of agrarian work, your hands get calloused. They're not soft. She's been working with sheep, so she probably doesn't smell too good when she's working. Livestock stinks. And when you work with livestock, you can't help but smell like them. And so she's kind of looking at herself going, this is my job. My hair is probably not clean. And, and in this space of just reflection, she's probably thinking about her everyday life and going, I don't match. And we do that too. On the scale of human relationship, we will tell ourselves all the time, in the tanglements of intimacy, how unlovable we are. Whether it's something from our past, something from our present, something on the inside of how we feel, something we were told that we believe that just wasn't true. The narrative that happens in our heads, it begins to tell us that we're not lovable. If I took a show of hands, we would be too embarrassed to raise and count the hands in the room or online of the tensions of people who feel unlovable. We wouldn't even want to admit it, but we know it. That dynamic of how and where do we feel? Where do we really belong? Can someone, if you knew what I really did, if you knew what I was really like, could you still love me? You ever think something like that? And yet, like, the beauty of the gospel is when you were at your worst, God said, I do. When you were at your worst. When you were at your worst, God says, I love you. Not at your best. I was talking with a fellow this week. I hope he comes later today. He says, is it okay for me to come to church in my sweatpants? I don't have a suit. And he's in a certain situation where he had lost some of his belongings, and I was like, I'm not going to wear a suit. Some people at Cornerstone may wear suits. I don't think I see any in the room this morning. Maybe online maybe you're in a suit today, not in your pajamas. I don't know. It's a little much, but okay. But yeah, come. I mean, like God invites us to come just as we are. And here's the secret. If we come just as we are, we actually come quite unlovely to the one who says, I still love you. For all the things that we've been through, we're rough. Our skin, it's not smooth. We smell like livestock. The stench of our souls because of sin around us. The weight of hurt and trauma that we bring into relationship. And yet God says, every single ounce of that, I say yes to. Bring it. I love you. But we struggle. Our intimacy gets tangled. Our relationship with God and with others is tangled because we don't know that we're lovable. We can love others all day, but I can't possibly be loved in return. And when that feeling takes over, when my identity gets tangled in being unlovable, I can't experience intimacy with others. Because that wall of self-doubt and self-criticism will be there. We struggle with receiving love. We think we're unlovable, and then when someone actually says, I love you, we're like, no, don't do that. Where do you pasture your sheep, she asks. I was sent out in the hot sun. Will you do the same? Will you send me out into the same places my mother's brothers did? That's what she's asking. If I say that we can have love together, will you hurt me in the same way? Or will you accept me in? And then we struggle with actually receiving the love that's being given. We can tell God we love him all day long, but to be told that we are unconditionally loved by him is mind-blowing to us. And in that dynamic, we go, how in the world do I possibly live into a God who says, I only love you? I have purposed you for this. And it's in that struggle that as we detangle it, that those are the things that we have to fight against on a daily basis, not and just in our human relationships, but also in our divine relationship. Like with God who loves us most, a perfectly equipped and a perfectly capable lover who doesn't hold against you, who made every step possible to love you, we will say we can't possibly be loved. And we start to make up reasons and things that we could do to make God love us more. But when someone loves you completely, there's nothing more you can do to get more love. Sometimes we just have to receive it. And when you start to watch this happen in our human relationships, one of the greatest tensions that we have is in receiving love. You ever gone to dinner with somebody and that awkward moment, because you didn't talk about it beforehand, of who's going to pay? And then you watch the stare down happen. Who's going to get it first? Right? And then the first person, once they take it, the second person always has to say, oh, no, please let me get it. Right? You have to at least give some type of standard shot in there, right? Instead of just saying, thank you, and receiving the gift, we want to fight over ownership of responsibility. But when it comes to intimacy with God, there's no struggle there. God's like, I've got the tab from now and forevermore. Be loved by me. Receive. Receiving the gift is one of the hardest things, and we see this woman struggle with this with the man. He does affirm her. If you don't know, most beautiful woman, follow the tracks of the flock and pasture your young goats near the shepherd's tent. You don't have to be outside in the rough environment anymore. That's what he's telling her. Because my tent is there and the sheep graze alongside my tent. You have shade, you have protection, you are valued, and you are invited. Do you hear what he's saying in those statements? You can bring your sheep, follow the tracks to my tent. Leave your sheep and goats here. I was put out in the sun. My skin is dark. My hands are rough. I smell like livestock. Bring your livestock to the field. You come inside. You stay in the tent. They will graze on this grass. There is safety and there is security. There is a place. And the man, when he responds back to her, begins to affirm the tensions of intimacy. And we have to detangle it. As we detangle intimacy, part of what we see is when we entangle ourselves in the world's way, we will doubt all day long if we are lovely enough. We are never enough for anyone in the world. We are never enough by some weird standard. And then when you ask, whose standard are you wondering about, we don't even know who to answer. Who told you you weren't lovely enough? Was it a teacher? Was it a parent? Was it a grandparent? Was it a brother? What's the story that you believe that says you're not worthy and lovely enough? Who set the standard for you? When God sets the standard, he says you are lovely. The true love of Jesus says you're made in the image of God. You are lovely. God's image is worth its time. Male, female, old, young, among a beautiful spectrum of skin tones, histories, backgrounds, and cultures. Being made in the image of God says you are lovely. When we entangle ourselves in the world's way, we doubt if we are lovable. And yet the true love of Jesus says that God took every step forward to love you. For God so loved the world, he sent his one and only Son. He took the steps. You are lovable. The world, when we entangle ourselves to the world, we doubt if we belong with another. Do I actually fit with anybody else? Do I have a place with someone? Or do I have to be stuck in the field where the angry people sent me? But the true love of Jesus says you have a place and a purpose. You have belonging. Like the fears and the tensions and the struggles of our intimacy, they are actually answered in the good news of Christ. And we see this as it unfolds to enhance intimacy when the gospel comes alive in us. I don't mean saying yes to Jesus so you can go to heaven one day, okay? Like that's been preached a lot, and that's good news. Going to heaven is way better than going to hell, from what I'm told. Never been to either place. But the gospel has the power to transform your life today, not just for later. We're told in Scripture that the gospel is the power of God for salvation, and that power changes us. The question is do we believe it and do we live into it? When we live into the gospel, that ability to love actually enhances. When we make love the way God intended, we enjoy the security of commitment. When intimacy comes alive in us and that process of loving others comes forward, I don't mean simply in a sexual context. I mean between humans and in relationship with God, as love is made forward, we enter into the act of loving others. We enjoy the security of commitment. God will never leave us or forsake us. To have that type of security in relationship with another is fundamental to my well-being and experiencing intimacy. When we make love the way God intended, we can experience the joy of unreserved passion. The woman isn't shamed for being passionate for her lover. She's not shamed. I remember when I first said yes to Jesus. More significantly, when I told my family I was going into ministry. The conversation that happened that day at lunch, I said, today I gave my entire life over to God to be in service to Him now and forevermore. I thought my family was going to lose it. Conversations of don't ask us for money, because that's what preachers do. You ask everybody for money. Don't proselytize in our house, because all you do is going to Bible thump and all that kind of thing. And yet God invites me into a relationship with Him with unreserved passion for His way. It's the best way to live. Why be dull about it? I could be dull about it and sit on the sidelines and just wonder if my faith could ever be exciting, worthwhile, livable. Yet God is constantly driving us to this place of going, this is the life. This is the life. A life of lust and materialism, that's just not going to stroke for long. That's going to get you somewhere empty at the end of the day. But a life of unreserved passion for a God who fulfills completely, can I live into that? It really gets down to, do I really believe what God says? Do I really believe what His gospel tells me? Or will I believe some of it and grab onto a bunch of other stuff? Because when life is lived fully into the gospel, that transformation piece is there, and we can have unreserved passion filled with joy. Doesn't mean hard times don't come. But we have belonging. We have space. We're there. We don't have to worry about what God's going to do with us. And it unfolds in our human relationships. When I live into love, when I make love the way God intended, I discover the courage to give myself unhindered to another. Whether that's giving my life to God and the way He calls me to live, or it's in being a great friend to someone, being a better husband, being a dad. Unhindered. There are days that I wish my love was unhindered. Some days it is. And some days it's still hinged up. None of us are perfect. We are being made more into the image of Jesus. And there are days that I'm like, God, come on, let's hurry this program up. I would love to be able to live unhindered. To be able to love unhindered. Without all the junk that swirls in the bad stories of your memory. The self-criticisms and doubts. The gospel has answers for those things. And it's when we pursue and we detangle intimacy in this that we find it to happen. Solomon's song has a beautiful echo for all of us. My prayer is that we will find love